Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the CTS-131 Section 402 course for the spring 2021 semester. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's Switching, Routing, and Wireless Essentials version 7 or SRWEv7 course. And in this activity, we're going to be taking a deep dive look at Packet Tracer 7.4.1, where we're going to be implementing DHCP version 4, or the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol for IPv4 hosts. Now, when we go to take a look at this activity, you're probably going to be saying to yourself, this looks frighteningly familiar to the activity you just did when we did 7.2.10. And you would be correct. It is the exact same topology. The PCs have been moved to the left and the right. But other than that, this is the exact same activity. However, here, we're being asked to do the DHCP configuration, and we are not provided with any of the steps. In other words, we're just asked to do certain things, but they're not showing you how to do it. So let's go ahead and power through 7.4.1, and let's start with part 1. So we're going to configure a router as a DHCP server, and it's going to be router number 2. And so let's go ahead and pull router 2 up here, give ourselves a little bit more room with which to work. And as you can see, we're still running EIGRP, but we're not working on EIGRP. We're focused on DHCP. And let me swing that back just a little bit. All right, so here we are on router 2. Let's go from user exec with the enable command to privilege exec, and then let's get into global config. Now, again, the first thing we're going to be doing here is creating our DHCP excluded address pool. And so to do that, I'm going to say IP DHCP excluded address. And this is going to be, it says low IP address. It wouldn't be so bad to maybe say beginning IP address, but we're looking for the first IP address in the range. And so we're going to exclude the first 10. So 192.168.10.1 all the way to 192.168.10.10. And we'll know right away when I hit enter, we get the 2 percentage points. And just like we did last time, we're going to change it so that we get the router 3 LAN segment as well, and that we exclude the first 10 IPs. Now remember, very important semantic here, that we're doing the DHCP allocation off of a router not connected to the LAN segment. Therefore, the use case here would be, it's a good idea, right, to exclude the router interface that would be the router 1 interface and the router 3 interface, which is the 192.168.10.1 and 30.1 respectively. Because router 2 does not know that this is the IP address on that interface. So in this use case, we would want to include that in the excluded range. In the other topology we were working with, where we had a single router and that router was your DHCP server, you did not have to do that, because iOS is smart enough to know that if I've configured a DHCP pool and the network statement includes an interface on that router, that router's interface is not going to be leased out so that someone can get it. All right, so we've done the first 10 addresses, and so now we're going to configure our DHCP pools here. So we're going to say IP DHCP pool, and we're going to call it R1-LAN. Now, it says the pool name must match, and we did get the points for that, so we're good to go. And now let's configure this DHCP pool to include a network address, the default gateway, and the DNS server. Again, the exact thing that we did in activity 7.2.10. So the network statement for the first network, 192.168.10.0, and this is a /24. And then the DNS server, which we see up there in the left-hand side, which is probably 192.168.20.254. And yes, it is, just looking up there, we're good to go there. And then what about our default router or default gateway, 192.168.10.1. So now we need another DHCP pool, IP DHCP pool, R3-LAN. And we're going to do the exact same thing we just did. In fact, I can even pull back the DNS server. That's going to be the same. Let's go ahead into the network, 192.168.30.0, and we'll make this a /24. And then we'll do our DNS server, 192.168.10.1. 12.20.254. Just had to double check that, looking over here on the side. All right, so that takes us up to 32%. So now we're going to configure DHCP relay. So configure router 1 and router 3 as DHCP relay agents. And how do we do that? Well, we go on to the interface that would receive that DHCP discover packet. Remember, the DHCP discover is a broadcast packet. Source address is quad zeros because the PC that's generating the discover doesn't have an IP. That's why it's generating the discover. But the destination is quad 255s. So 255.255.255.255. And then that MAC address is going to be PC1's MAC address. And the destination MAC is all Fs, as in Foxtrot, right? So 12 Fs, they're hexadecimal. Each one is 4 bits. 12 times 4, 48 bits. That's where we get that MAC address value of 48 bits. And so we're going to put it on the interface that's connected to the LAN where that DHCP discover is going to come in, right? Because remember, by default, the DHCP discover is a broadcast. Routers, by default, do not forward broadcasts. They are bound by the broadcast domain. And routers break up or separate broadcast domains. But we can work around that by going into global config and getting into interface gig 00 and saying IP helper address and then putting in the address of router number 2. And it's going to be the serial interface. Let me double check here. 10112. And so this is going to be 10222. I'm just double checking here to make sure we're good to go. All right, so we should pick up a few points for that, and we do. So now router 1's properly configured, and then router 3, same thing. We're going to go from user exec to privilege exec with the enable command, configure terminal to get into global config, and we're simply going to say int gig 00 IP helper address 10.2.2.2, which, let me double check. Yes, that is router 2's address, and we picked up 14 points doing that as well. So let me pull this back just a skosh, and these kind of got out of whack a little bit there. All right, so router 1 and router 3 have been set up as DHCP relay agents. So now we're going to set PC1 and PC2 to get their information from the DHCP servers. So we're going to come into PC1. I'm going to make sure I don't go to the IPv6 configuration tab here, the configuration stanza here, and we're going to click DHCP for IPv4, and I should be 10.11. And there it is. Take a look at that. We've got all the information that we're looking for. And let's come over to PC2 and let's do the exact same thing. Kick over to DHCP and 30.11. So everything looks good for both PC1 and PC2, which I'm going to move out of the way here. And they've got their addressing information. So now we need to configure router 2 as a DHCP client because the internet service provider can provide us with an IPv4 address via DHCP, right? And many cable modems that you might be using are doing this exact same thing where they're getting their address via DHCP if you're not paying for a static IP, right? And so this is one way you can facilitate that. So let's go ahead and say do show IP interface brief, and this is gigabit Ethernet 01, and we'll see that when we say no shut. And that interface has now been brought up. And here is where I am going to use my fast forward arrows to let Spanning Tree do its thing here and be done. Because now what we want to say is IP address DHCP. And that's it. And so now we should get a message, a syslog message telling me, hey, and there it is, DHCP, right? It's an informational message. Severity level 6, address assigned to interface gig 01. And here's the address that we picked up, 209.165.200.254, and it is a /27. Again, it's not typical that you're going to have a /24 between yourself and your provider, right? Typically not how things are going to be done, especially if you're doing it static, right? Especially if you're doing it static. But we're doing DHCP here. So we are at 97%, and that tells me that we have left something out here. Let me double check this again. The relay agent, DHCP pool. Let me check my DHCP pools here. So let's go ahead and get out of this. Let's say write mem And I'm going to say show run inc DHCP. All right, so there's our excluded address, and everything looks good with the excludes. The pool names are correct, and let's do a show run pipe it to section DHCP, and let's take a look at the entire configuration stanza here for both of these, and the default router, and what did we forget, right? Because if I was to come over here and let me show you, if you haven't figured out what we forgot, I'm going to come to PC2, and let's see. Whoops, not terminal. Let's see if I can ping www.cisco.com. And technically, we should not be able to do this. In fact, not only can I not ping Cisco.com, as you can see, but what would happen if I tried to ping 192.168.10.11? Can PC2 ping PC1? Let's see if this works. And the request is timed out, right? And the reason that the request is timing out is because if I go to PC2 and we take a look at the config, look at my default gateway. Because unfortunately on router 2, when I did that pool, IP DHCP pool, L3, R3-LAN, I forgot to put in here default router of 192.168.30.1. There we go. So now let's save our config, and let's see, does it pick it up auto-magically? Well, it doesn't look like it is going to, so I'm going to go static, and then we're going to go DHCP. And as you can see, we're at 100%, and now we have the default gateway. So easy enough for me to test this, and I could even test it in a browser, because now we can actually test the DNS server as well. And can I get to Cisco.com? We'll click go, and it works like a champ. Come over here to PC1. We'll close this down, we'll pull up the web browser, and we'll basically say www.publicsite.com. And look at that. So we've got success across the board. Again, the exact same activity that we did in 7.2.10. However, now we're being asked to do it from memory. We're not being provided with the commands to make the DHCP configuration happen. All right, well, that is going to do it for this activity on implementing DHCPv4 from the SRWEv7 course curriculum. This was Packet Tracer 7.4.1. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.